Hey guys, welcome back. Today it's Chris and we're going to be talking about some of the keys towards becoming successful. The first one that I want to talk about is accountability, not only to your team, not only to others, but specifically yourself. If one is consistently unaccountable, it shouldn't be surprising why one is consistently unsuccessful. They are directly related to each other. So what does that mean specifically? Well, if you can start taking accountability for your own actions to an extreme degree, so extreme ownership of every single outcome that you've ever been a part of, success is just basically walk some steps away. Now what that basically means is the only person who's consistently accountable in your life is you. You're the only individual who's going to be present in every single situation. So you having the ability to understand that your actions are going to affect every single outcome, then that means that you have the power to change it. Once you are the common denominator, if you are a part of the common denominator, one has the power to fix it. That means that if you have less than 1% of a stake in an outcome, 1%, you have 100% opportunity to completely change it, which therefore means that you are 100% accountable every single second of every single situation that you are in. This is 100% even more applicable, especially if you lead any form of team. And if you're in a position of leadership, in fact, I always talk about how every single person is in a position of leadership because they're always leading themselves, then you should definitely start applying this principle. Whenever it comes to situations, mistakes are always going to happen. If you run any sort of business, running any sort of team, manage any type of organization, mistakes are always going to happen. Now, the worst thing that you can do is start looking towards blaming anyone else, because when you look towards blame, progress stops. When you're focusing on blaming, progress stops. No more effort can be put towards a solution because you're too busy figuring out what's going to happen to the person who's at fault, when in reality, it's you. It's always going to be you. There's always something that you could have done if you had the foresight, or if you basically put yourself in a position to make sure the outcome changed. You always have the potential to change that. So as a leader, right, you should definitely look into all the different types of books that are out there, because it talks about how no matter how extreme, no matter how minuscule, that you could have basically chosen to change the outcome, you were 100% accountable. That is the only way to make sure that no matter what, you are consistently progressing to becoming a better performing team. I'll tell you a story. Basically, there's two guys wrote all these books about the leadership. One of them being extreme ownership. Extreme ownership. In the story, these two Navy SEAL captains talk about how a building was held down by the Navy SEAL team. Now he wasn't there, but he was directing officer from a distance. Now for some reason, this team was being shot down. They were pinned down by enemy fire at the time, and they were going on for hours and hours and hours and hours. And he was told to call an airstrike on the building. In order to basically kill the people that were on there. Now, he saw it, for some reason, he got the sudden feeling that he shouldn't do it and that they should confirm who it is that they might be firing on, even though he was told to do it. Now, what ended up happening was that the US Army soldiers were on the grounds and it was Navy SEALs in the building, so it was friendly fire for multiple hours. Luckily, no one was killed in the event due to him not being able to do it, due to him not being firing the airstrike, but in the whole event, everybody was scurrying around to figure out who was the person at fault. They were blaming everybody, trying to figure it out, trying to understand how is it that this massive catastrophe happened. And it wasn't until the officer, the leader of the US Navy SEALs, basically took a step back, the one who chose to save all those men's lives by not shooting, said, "It's my fault." He said he should have had the foresight to do that. And he took on the massive blame, the massive thing on the soldier, all of these men that could have died on his shoulders, and basically accepted the blame. Every single one of them. He accepted it. And now, a lot of people would view that story and think that's crazy, especially seeing as though hearing the facts, it's not his fault. But the truth is that if he's in a leadership position, then he should have had more due diligence. He should have done his research on that day's army reconnaissance. He should have done his day on the briefing report. If he did all of that, then all of this would have been able to be avoided. But he didn't. And that's why he started to hold himself accountable. Now, a lot of people hearing that might think that he would have gotten massive backlash. Was he fired from the role, or was he dishonorably discharged? Well, the truth is his entire platoon, his entire men of everybody that was following him, they actually owned up to him. They stood up for him. See, when blame is taken, respect is gained. When blame is taken, respect is gained. The old army unit actually looked towards him as an example, and every single person started taking acceptance and blame for their own actions and what they could have done better in the situation. And what that ended up happening was that they could, rather than focusing on who to blame and who to punish and who to reprimand, all they could do is focus on how to make sure that something like this never would happen again. How we can put steps and precautions in to ensure that something like this never happens again. And the stuff that he did back in 2008 are still applying today in the US Army Corps and the Navy Rangers and everything like that, to make sure that this type of extreme tragedy that was thankfully avoided never even occurs again. And that's the example of extreme ownership. When something seems so minuscule that you could have made a difference. If you ever think, hey, on this, I could have done the smallest thing. I could have gone out of my way to put myself in a position to make sure that this didn't happen. You have 100% stake in changing that outcome, and you should 100% take blame and take responsibility for what happened. Because that is the only constant way to make sure that your team, the people that you're working with, including yourself, not only gain respect from a leadership position, but most importantly, ensure that that type of problem never runs into again. And now, you might be thinking that's extreme, that's excessive, but the fact is that if that person does it in that extreme circumstance, where it is arguably certainly not his fault, but yet he still took the blame on, how many situations where you do have more mistakes in the outcome that are you not accepting? The one who is consistently unaccountable for his actions is consistently going to be unsuccessful. Every successful person takes blame for every situation that they're in. Those are the facts. So if you duplicate what it is that these successful people are doing, these principles that they have, the way of life, success is just going to be a matter of time. Understand that every single person that you're in is a leader. Every single person is a leader, no matter what. You're either leading yourself, someone else, both, at every given point in time. So what direction are you leading these people to? Because if you're, as a leader, you're not a person who's accountable for their actions, you should be seen as someone who they can go to with their problems. You should be seen as a leader that people, rather than being fearful of you, if things go wrong, they do something wrong, they can go to you with the problem they have. How many times do you have managers where you've done something wrong and you've tried, if you ever worked, growing up in high school, I used to work in McDonald's. Now, we had a lot of people in management positions, but none of them were leaders. All they knew how to do was manage people's time. They didn't know how to inspire any of us. And how many people can relate to this situation when they're working and something goes wrong? The first thing they try to do is hide it from the manager. Because they understand they're going to be reprimanded. That is a sign of poor leadership. A leader should be something that whenever something goes wrong, you should be able to go to with everything, knowing that they're going to have your back, solve the problem. You may be reprimanded, but you shouldn't be at risk of being fired. And the way that you start doing that is by, number one, being accountable for your actions. There's a lot of other things that you can do, but that's the first, probably easiest step that a lot of people can do. Be accountable for yours and your team's actions. Okay? If there's the weakest link of the team who's letting you fall behind, that is the leader's fault. Right? If every single person in that team is inspired and wants to be there, which is directly linked to what the leader is basically doing, the leader's job is to inspire others. A manager's job is just to micromanage your time. That's the difference. No one actually gets... If you're working a job that you hate, that you dislike, chances are it's probably because your leader, or the person you are that's leading you, isn't very inspiring. Okay, so that's the first thing that you need to understand, that these types of people are there to inspire, and you should be able to go there with whatever problems happen. You shouldn't be scared or fearful of your leader. You should have respect. You should definitely have respect, which sometimes comes with fear or nervousness, but whenever it comes to problems, or ones that you specifically are struggling with or can't solve, you should be feeling okay to go to your leader. Or if you're the leader, your people should be feeling okay and happy to come to you. Those are the facts. That's the way it needs to be. That's a sign of you being a good leader, inspiring others to the point where it's not fearful of you, but when they have a problem, they're happy to explain it to you in order for it to be solved. They should never be fearful of being fired if they make a mistake. They should be happy to come to you because they know that you can fix it. That's an indication of a great leader. Alright? And the only way to get to that stage is if you start taking accountability for your actions. I used to work in a team. For a company, I had one of the best leaders that I ever had in my life. I had no idea how it was that he developed this way at such a young age. And when I made a mistake and I stuffed up, I was worried that I was going to lose my job. I made a mistake. There was a compliance issue. I had the wrong code of conduct when it came to the company. It was a complete accident, but it was still my fault. But I was completely worried that I was going to get fired for it. I was a young 18-year-old kid. My leader, because I was basically happy to go to him, I owned up to the situation, I let him know what it was that I was doing wrong. My leader said, he reprimanded me, told me the solution and said it's going to be okay because you're a part of my team. And if you're a part of my team, then that means that it was my fault. And he ended up going to his boss and explaining how it was his fault. And because of that, and took ownership of his team, no one got in trouble outside of the solution. The problem was solved to the solution. More respect was gained to the leader, and I understood what it really meant to have someone that you can trust. See, trust and honesty are the foundations of leadership. Trust and honesty are the foundation of leadership. If you have people within your team, or you're lying to your team, or directly, it's okay. For leaderships, you should only let them know the things that do affect them. Don't always let them know the negative. That's to do with the inner circle. But your team should definitely have trust and honesty with you. That's a fact. That's the way that trust is going to be about. It has to be back and forth. You cannot run a successful team unless that there's a level of trust and honesty. And that can't be found unless you're honest with yourself first. It all comes back to accountability. Everything comes back to accountability. I think that a team that can be honest with its actions, that can start focusing on working on solutions, no matter what, eventually going to win. They might not be winning today, they might be successful tomorrow, they might be getting the results that they need to that month. But if they are consistently honest and upfront about the actions and faults, then it is just a matter of time before the improvements are in place and success starts to happen. That is what's going to happen. That needs to spiral. If you can instill that you can take faults for everything, and you can take blame for everything, a lot of people might think that they just blame you. That's what a lot of people would think, people who don't understand leadership, that if the leader takes blame for everything, doesn't that mean that his entire team will just go, oh, well, it's his fault. It's his fault for this. No, that's the complete opposite happens. The complete opposite happens. People follow and do what their leader does. So if their leader does take, honest actions and takes honest blame for all the mistakes of the team members fall in line. It's a crazy phenomenon. But it makes a lot of sense. For example, your parents, they're essentially your leaders when you first start growing up. They're the ones who teach you how to act. They're the ones who teach you how to behave. And if your parents are the types of people who consistently dodge blame and put it onto others, then I think that you're going to naturally develop that way. Because monkey see, monkey do. That's the way that it works. Now, that's the same way a team works, especially if you're in a young, impressionable team. If you're leading a team under the age of 25 whose characters and general behavior isn't 100% instilled yet, I think that majority of the team is going to duplicate specifically how you act, especially when it comes to hardships. And if you try to dodge blame, they will as well. And it's just a matter of time before your team falls apart. Can you imagine a scenario when no one accepts blame? If something goes wrong and nobody accepts blame, then everybody's focus is going to be finding out who did it, or what went wrong where, and whose fault is it. All of a sudden you have a bunch of inactivity, a bunch of unproductive work, because so many people are just focusing on the problem, rather than focusing on the solution. And that is the biggest advice that I can get you. When people focus on trying to put blame, progression stops, which means that success becomes an impossibility. Success becomes an impossibility when progress stops, and that happens when blame still hasn't been found. The only thing that you can consistently do in every single outcome is accept it for yourself. That is the only way to basically focus on, I understand that the past happens, let's reflect and evaluate, but rather than letting us hold us out, I am the one responsible, and let's move it forward. It is absurd to think, if you're in a leadership position, that it is anyone else's fault but your own. Because just because you didn't know something was going on, doesn't mean you could have put yourself in a position to find out. If your team member is thinking about leaving, if your team member is thinking about doing something wrong, if you were in the position to talk with your team enough and evaluate their situations, maybe have a level of empathy, you might have found that out. Just because you don't directly know because of your current actions and your current habits doesn't mean that you can't change them. Do you see an example of how no matter what you're accountable? If someone starts having the thought of not wanting to be in the team, right, well, you might be thinking, well, how was I supposed to know that? Well, maybe you could have talked to them. Maybe you could have talked to that person and maybe they would have opened up to you and maybe you could have solved the problem versus them leaving the team. These are the examples of something that's so minuscule, and you might have been able to do the correct habits and correct leadership within your team in order to stop these types of things from happening. And that is the hard part. It's not easy. Trust me, it's not easy. You will always feel as if maybe this is going to end up worse than what it is. But the truth is nothing but respect is gained. Nothing but respect is gained from your peers, from the people that lead you, and on top of that yourself, when you start taking blame for absolutely every action that you have within your team. It's a crazy phenomenon. I highly suggest you start applying it literally right now. Now, it also goes towards yourself. Okay, it goes towards yourself. Outside of your team, right, when you're leading your every day-to-day life, I'm talking about your relationships, I'm talking about your business that you're owning, I'm talking about your hobbies that you have, I'm talking about your sports teams that you're on the side. The second you start taking advantage, Kobe Bryant in his rookie year, his biggest regret in his first 2 years was the fact that he was on his bench and he wasn't able to help his team. He wasn't able to help his team. He felt as if he could have been in the game, but because he was a rookie and there was just a process that happened, he felt as if he was responsible because he was on the bench. This is a man who's genuinely not in the game, who physically is not in the game and actually can't actively do anything, took responsibility for this. And do you know what he said? If he trained harder in high school, he would have been a higher pick. And if he was a higher pick, he would have been on a worse team, which would have allowed him to have minutes. That's what he said. So he got mad at himself for not being picked higher at 18. He was one of the few people who was picked directly out of high school. And he was so mad that he didn't get picked higher, because if he got picked higher, he would have been on a team that was worse off, which meant that he would have had more playing time, which meant that he would have had more accountability, which is a crazy concept. It's a crazy concept. This man was mad that he didn't have more minutes so that it couldn't affect the team to win. And that's the type of mentality that you have. If you're literally completely out of the activity when it comes to the action, for example, if you're running a sales team, if you're running a sales team and you can't be there when the person is selling, and then there's an issue within the thing, there's an issue with that person, he can't close the deals, he has retention issues, okay? How can you actively affect that sale? Well, the answer is you can't. The answer is you can't always be there with your team members, but you definitely can coach, inspire, teach, learn, and increase your people's skill set and mindset. So although you might not have been directly there with the sale, you certainly can inspire the person that's there. And that's the art of coaching. And that's the art of actively wanting to get better. When it comes to leadership, you have to understand that there's so many different types. There's so many different people that you need to lead, so many different personalities that you need to balance. And if you yourself aren't balanced, it's going to be incredibly difficult to start juggling other people's. And the first step towards developing that is accountability within yourself. Accountability with your own integrity. And you need to take a step back, and it's tough. And you need to take a step back and look and be like, am I the type of leader that I would want to follow? Am I the type of leader that I want to follow? Now the answer should always be yes, but I can have improvements, or no. So what do I need to change? Those are the two answers that you should always be taking. Yes, I would want to follow myself. However, there are things that I want to change. Or no, I don't. So what is it that I need to do differently? And it's always going to start with accountability. Where is it? The world-class people, world-class leaders, whenever they come directly off of a win, the biggest win of their life, they end up getting their business into the green for the first time in 7 years. They end up getting picked for the NBA draft. They end up winning a championship. The world-class leaders who win as a team, the first thing they ask themselves, or they go to their coach, and they say, what is it that I could have done better? Because there always is something that you could have done better. Generally speaking, it's not an effort. It's more skill set orientated. But there is always something you can do better. And that's a level of accountability with yourself. Because accountable means that you can be honest. Accountable means that you can take the emotion out of the situation, view it from a logical perspective, and understand the changes, implementations, and where you could have improved to make sure that you got a better result. That's the facts when it comes to leadership. And if you can start applying that and instilling it within yourself, your team is just going to follow. So it's super, super important that you lead by example. Okay? Because if you have a team full of people who think that way, you guys would be inspiring. You'd have movies being written about you. And that's exactly what happens. Teams that can take accountability, that can put ego aside and understand the problems at hand and the solutions that need to be thought together. If you're running a team of 5 people where everyone's trying to blame versus 5 people who understand the blame is on them, then you have 5 people who are actively working on solutions and things they could have directly done better. Now don't get me wrong, blame comes in different sizes. There are some people who should be held more accountable than others. But the facts are is that if you're running a team, you will always have 1% of a stake in an outcome. Every single time you will have a 1%. If you are a common denominator, then that means you have the power to change it. You have the power to fix it, and you have the power to do the right things. That's just how it works. If you are a part of the equation, that means that you have a 100% opportunity to change it. No matter how big, no matter how small, always accept blame. Always understand there is something that you could have done better. Even if you had no idea. If you had no idea that there is something that you could have changed, then that means that you could have put yourself in a position where you did. I think you're not talking to your people. I think that you lack a report process. I think that there is a communication issue. A leader who covers his ears so that he can't be accountable for the problems of his team, that's an issue in itself. So that should never be an excuse. That's the biggest one that people talk to me about. They're like, but I had no idea. Well, you should have. You're the leader, and it's tough. It's like, so you're telling me I should have spoken to my people? Yes. You definitely should have spoken to your people. Communication is key. Communication is the number one thing to a successful team. The best teams, you look at anyone from sports to business, there is such an efficient and effective level of communication. And with that comes understanding. With that comes knowledge. And with knowledge, there's power. And from there, you're able to develop more successful orientations, more successful pipelines, more successful courses of action. But all of that stems with blame. Understanding that in every situation, there's something that you could have been done better. Every situation. Even if everything goes perfectly, fundamentally speaking, there's something you could have done better. Fundamentally speaking, there's something that you definitely could have done better. You could have performed better in one aspect that day. And if you have that mindset, then no matter what, you're going to be striving to become better. The thing about success is it's not something you definitely achieve. It's more so something that you strive for. strive for it every single day. Make it a habit. Actively look towards achieving more, and eventually you will become. That's the answer. Anyway guys, that's it for the video. I'm Chris, but don't stop there. Keep looking towards improving yourself. There are a lot of other videos on the channels that you can utilize to put yourself in a better position for success. But on that one guys, I'll see you in the next one.